Welcome to the Facetime with Scientists podcast. Today we're talking to Shelby Prindaville, a science artist and art department chair and art professor at Morningside University. Shelby, we're here talking today about your art and how you blend art and science. So, um, can you just maybe describe a little bit about what you're working on today?
So I've got a ceramic bowl here that I am trimming the lip of, which is the sort of upper edge. My work is very much about sort of nature in a human impacted world, if that makes sense. So for my ceramics in particular, I like it to be a collaboration with the clay. So I form using however much clay I grabbed, and then I leave sort of the raw edge, if you will, but just smooth it over instead of like enforcing a very flat line. So here's a finished piece that I may or may not have time to glaze while I'm with you too, and you can see like no two will be the same because of that. So.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. Well, okay, so this is really cool because I know that you've done like all types of different types of artwork. You have sculptures, paintings, like, I'll link to your website so people can kind of see all the different types of art that you do. But when I first met you, you were actually working at LSU with a professor there that, was a chemistry professor, and you developed a kinda new clay, and I
Yeah,
remember
John
very
Boyman,
vividly
uh-huh.
yeah, I remember very vividly you working on little, like, lizard sculptures that would stand up and do things that you had to have, like, a unique clay to do, so can you reflect on that and,
Of
like
course.
yeah.
Yeah, that was such a cool opportunity. So while I was in grad school, we got this email from the director of the School of Art, Rod Parker, one day, and it said that there was this opportunity, if people wanted, completely voluntary, to come to the wood shop and beta test a new art material. And I was like, absolutely, I'm down. I have to sign up right away. It's going to be like packed. And very few of us showed up, which I actually was kind of disappointed in my fellow humans about, but it meant that I lucked out because I got to work really closely with him because it ended up only being me and one other artist who not only attended, but then followed through and tried it. And at the time, it was a medium, so it was, sort of like watery enough that it was not like sculptural, that you had to apply it to like a surface like canvas or something like that. And after I beta tested that for a little bit, I was like, listen, I love this. This is cool. But also the price point you're looking at to manufacture this, there's too much similar stuff that's just cheaper to produce on the market. So it's not really viable. And he was like, thank you for your feedback. Like, like I'll take that into account, and then we just continued to sort of stay friends, and so occasionally he'd invite me to his lab to see what he was doing, and at one point in the, like, future, I came to his lab, and he had converted it into a much thicker material so that he could help fabricate bullets in the field for the US Army.
Alright, I didn't know that.
So I was in there and I was like, "Wait, I'm sorry, you can make this, like, way thicker?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I mean, that's under my control." And I was like, "Sir, if you can convert this into a sculptural material, I think it would have enough unique qualities to be able to be marketable even at the high price point that the, like, ingredients cost." And so we started working on, so I became an alpha tester for that because I mean, it didn't exist. So, like, he would try something and give it to me, and I would attempt to use it. And then I would be like, "Oh, this did not work." And then he would, like, reformulate and give it back to me, and we did that until we developed something that I was like, "This is great." And that's probably about the time you started seeing it, was when it was actually functional. But since then, we actually did license it to I say we, he licensed it, it's his product, I just am the artist involved. But he licensed it to 2 different companies, and then actually most recently is back to producing and selling it himself. It's called Quick Cure Clay, and you can buy it directly from John Poyman if you want.
That is so cool. Yeah, um, how did you get into science art, like, to begin with?
I think I think so, like, I will answer that question, like, very backing up a little bit more even, art specifically as a sort of discipline is extremely interdisciplinary by its very nature. Like, you're using, especially if you use a lot of different media, like, it just requires a certain sort of material science knowledge across different areas, and then depending on what your focus is, that brings in other stuff too. So, art is just exceptionally interdisciplinary as what it is. And then I myself, I think in college, when I was an art major, but I thought I was gonna be a lawyer, so I was also pre-law. But in college, you start to sort of figure out that if you do wanna continue in any area, you kind of have to start being known for something, right? Like, you can't be a dilettante across every single variable. It doesn't like, no one knows what to come to you for if that's the case. So, as I started trying to figure out how to specialize, I was like, "Well, what do I have sustained interest in already? Like, what could I actually, like, build a career out of and be happy I'm still focusing on it 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later? Like, what do I see myself as having sustained interest in already?" And that's a hard question, I think, for a college student to always be able to answer because, you're still kind of figuring out who you are as an adult and you don't
Yeah.
have that much history on the earth. But in thinking about my own passions and my interests, I was like, at that point, I had been vegetarian for like over a decade already. And I was like, I think focus on like the environment and ecology, animals, plants, nature. Like, I don't see that interest going away, to be honest. Like, other things may come and go, but that specifically, I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. So in college, as I was preparing for my like sort of senior thesis graduating show, I started focusing on that, and simultaneously, actually, there was more of a religious undercurrent at that time to my work. And then as I've continued my professional career, I would say the religious undertones are significantly quieter. They're not gone, but the real focus is sort of nature in a human altered world.
Yeah, I remember one thing that has always stood out to me, you had an exhibit maybe around the same time where you had, like maybe it was the same one as the lizards, I don't remember, where you had, kind of like a bowl or something set up with plants that was like these, now I'm forgetting what they're called, the plants in Louisiana that
Yeah, the resurrection
yeah,
ferns.
the resurrection burn and
Mhm.
also the one that where you would touch it, the leaves, like,
Mimosa
close.
pudica, the
Yes.
sensitive plant.
Yeah, the
Uh-huh.
sensitive plant. So, I mean, I remember that plant from you showing it to me because now I find it, I'm like, "Oh," like, you touch the plant and the leaves move around. So, like, that I remember was, one of your early some of your early exhibitions at LSU as a student was these interactive exhibits where people could interact with nature.
Yeah, so that's what I mean when I talk about how art is so like, art by itself, I think, is just super interdisciplinary, so it just depends on, like, what intersection you're looking at, and I mean, you can, I suppose, in some way, be so narrow that you're mostly an artist making art about art in one specific media, but I think the more that that gets broad, the more something else kind of always comes in, so for some people, it might be histories, for some people, it might be memory, it might be English, right? Like, there's so many and for me, it's just a lot of it has been because of my focus on nature and ecology. Science is just constantly coming in. And then because I'm so interdisciplinary across art, material science, and media and all of that. So with those plant pieces, yeah, that was very much bringing in like my knowledge of botany and trying to show people that nature does respond to us. It's just especially for plants, a lot of times their response rate is a lot slower than what we can perceive, which is not to say they're not responding, but we can't always perceive it. So I wanted with those pieces to bring in this interaction where you can see them respond in a human time frame to human touch and interaction.
Yeah, that's super cool. Well, I know on your site you describe a lot of your work as like mixed media, or you're
Mhm.
using very much like so some of your pieces I think are so cool, like the reliefs where it's like a painting, but then there's aspects of it with like clay or whatever that like comes out of the painting to some extent.
Yeah, so mixed media just literally means there is more than one medium involved, and media is just shorthand for like what is the thing made out of. So mixed media could be as simple as it could be like graphite, pencil, and acrylic paint together. That could be referred to as mixed media. But also, it could be, a list of 40 different things together in a piece of artwork. For me, I've always been really interested in, and I would say ever more so as I continue growing as an artist, interested in the materiality of what the media is and how it ties to place and environment. And like, if I can get it really specific and really non traditional in terms of art media, like all the better in many ways. So, my media can include very traditional art materials like acrylic paint, but it also can involve things like I just finished a piece where I was using ferric chloride as a pigment, which is like not normal at all. And there frankly was no one else doing it. So I had to do a lot of research on like the safety data sheet to make sure that I was using it in a way that was like okay for me and the creation process and for viewers in the exhibition process so that I don't accidentally cause a situation
My gosh, was
environmentally,
that related
and
to
that's not
some
my point.
yeah, was it related to some science project? Like, what was the reason for
Yeah,
choosing it?
so there's every year in Sioux City, which is where I live now, there is a competition in the summer where a bunch of different artists all come together to produce a piece of work that's themed, and then the public comes and votes on which one is the best. And the first year that it happened, it was board games. So we all brought a board game in and we lottery drew a board game, and then we had to modify that board game to become a piece of art while still showing that it was a board game, right? Second year is puzzles. This year, it's vinyl records and covers. And I always, with these sort of challenges, I'm like, I think it's really important you don't lose who you are as an artist, right? So, like, you should still bring your point of view and who you are to the table. And so I was like, to be honest, I personally am not that interested in just directly painting on the vinyl record because that's a thing that a bunch of people already do. And the surface to me is not really like eco friendly at all, right? Like, it's a petroleum product.
Right.
And so I was like, I'm not really interested in like trying to pretend that this to me is a good substrate. But instead, what I am interested in is it as like this petroleum product, this like byproduct of human capitalism and like thinking about how it ages and deteriorates. And so I wanted to sort of age the piece artificially. And so I used ferric chloride, which is a metal salt, but also an acid, to etch and then like crystallize on the surface. And it's ferric chloride, right? Ferric meaning iron. So it sort of rusted and left like rust deposits. And it was also it happened to be ferric chloride from a printmaking bath, which means that it had some dissolved copper in it because you etch the copper plates for printmaking. So it also developed like copper patina areas as well. So that was kind of how that ferric chloride came in. So basically, the end product is this really sort of I titled it relic, and it's this very like aged sort of like imaginary because it's made of petroleum, so it's not gonna age as a metal, obviously, but it's imagining sort of this as this weird like relic of like human kind well after we're gone that still gets
Like
wrapped
the
in
vinyl record itself
petroleum based.
that you
Yeah.
were kind of degrading.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
uh,
Corroding, like
right.
creating this weird archaeological dig thing.
Yeah, that's super
I can
interesting.
send you a photo of it.
Yeah, no, it makes me think of, like, right, like, what's our footprint gonna be for future
Mhm.
generations, like, very much like the plastics and right, like, what are people gonna find when they go for archeological evidence of the modern era? It's kinda
Exactly,
sad
and
and
it's already
scary.
kind of that to our students, right? I mean, I teach college, so, like, the kids potentially have never even listened to a vinyl record nor would recognize one, some of them, right? So already it is kind of an artifact of our culture that is gonna kick around forever because of what it's made out of, so I just thought that was a much more interesting approach that is, like, more true to who I am as an artist, but I'm sure that some of the other people will be, like, painting on them.
Yeah, yeah. So what are you doing right now, like, in terms of these bowls? Like, what are you can you describe a little bit about, like, I don't know, yeah, what's this medium for and why is it live
Sure.
edges?
Yeah, so this is probably some of my more traditional ceramics. I do some more materiality focused ceramics where I like dig local clays and then
Gotcha.
create like local ash glazes. So they're like 100% site specific. But this is more me following, currently I'm really interested in raku, which is a low fire set of techniques. Most of them originated in Japan, and thus the name raku, which is the last name of like the family who is the most sort of famously associated with it. But some of the techniques like abara actually come from Eastern Europe, so it's a little bit of a mix. But yeah, I really like the opportunity, as you can probably tell from all of these stories, to work in ways that are maybe not always accessible to a lot of people, and raku specifically is just it's sometimes hard to have access to as a technique, and, I'm really fortunate that I live near a place that has workshops in it, especially because it's actually banned as a process in the town I live in. So the town I live in, you're it's illegal to do raku, but nearby there is, in South Dakota, there's a workshop where I can do it, and so I'm like, "Well, if I can do it and it's accessible, I should do it."
Wait, why
Um
is it illegal? Like, what
that's a great question. I am not 100% sure, but rumor has it, and I believe this is probably true because I have evidence, So Morningside, which is the place that I work at, has a tiny Raku outdoor kiln. I'm currently in the studio, if you're wondering why I keep pointing this way. It has a tiny Raku kiln in there, and it's for outdoor usage. And so we used to, I presume, given that we have a tiny Raku kiln, we used to do it. And so I believe that what I have heard from like former people who worked here well before me is that when we did it, it does sometimes, depending on what you're doing, create some kind of unpleasant smells.
Mm.
They're not unsafe, but they're not, like, fun, and so we believe what happened is that someone complained to the city council and
Oh
got an
gosh, yeah.
ordinance passed in the town.
Gotcha. That's super cool. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I know you've worked at so many different places with your artist residencies from like Peru to France, Japan, Spain. I guess what's something you've taken away as you've traveled to all these different places doing artist residencies? Yeah,
So
that
many
shapes your
things.
art now.
Yeah, I mean, so many things. Some of it's materials, especially because I try to work with like local practices. So, but like the raku, like I just got done the past summer and the summer before that, I was in Japan. I visited the Raku Museum of the family Raku in Kyoto.
Gotcha.
So some of this is like, yeah, like me sort of following through on research that I've done. But also, yeah, every time there's like new environments, there's new, like, fauna and flora to document, but there's new local materials, either traditional or non-traditional that I can bring into the artwork. So, like, I started working with Sumi ink, in Japan, when I previously have only used India ink, which is slightly different. I learned as I was doing it. Also, the washi papers in Japan are wild,
Oh,
and there are some papers that cost, like, over $100 for a single sheet that have,
wow.
like, precious metals and things in them, and it's just amazing and terrifying.
Yeah.
I didn't buy one over $100, but I did buy several that were, like, 50 to $60 for a
Wow.
sheet. And I did ruin one of them, like, almost instantly and was like, "Ooh." It's
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So, yeah, just every time it's something different, and sometimes it's collaborations too, right? So, like, in Athens, I got to work with an environmental scientist, and he took me out to find, some wildlife that he knew about, and we used his spotting scope, and then that kinda shaped the artwork because I was seeing it through this, like, round aperture instead of, like, the more normal, like I mean, your camera still has a round, but it, like, translates it to a rectangle, but this was,
Right.
like, through the round, and so then I started doing more round paintings, and I really liked round paintings, so now I've started doing more. Things like that, like, it just sort of builds into your practice.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I mean, you describe a lot of these, doing research with conservationists, with, wildlife biologists. I know that a lot of your artwork, on your website, a lot of your paintings feature kind of single or a couple different animals.
Mhm.
And I mean, so many of them are adorable, but they're really like, I don't know, there's an emotional element when I look at them, and then a lot of those are from residencies where you've worked with, like, for example, the LSU vet school that you did a residency there, which I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, what's maybe some of the can you chat a little bit about what those artworks represent and what are some of the things you're trying to help people take away from those?
Yeah, I think that a lot of my artwork, intentionally so, is very approachable initially, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, there's something emotionally, like, appealing, and maybe it seems relatively happy or like
Right.
something that is a good thing." And I think that's also true sometimes for the entire artwork. Sometimes it's just celebratory. I think most of my artwork actually has sort of darker, undertones if you, like, know enough
Right.
about either the media or about the situation documented. So, like, there's this one piece I made that's in the relief, section of my website that is a frog floating in like a pool of water that has algae on top. And so I've painted that whole thing. And a lot of people, when they see that piece, they're like, "Oh, this is like it reminds me of the summer and fishing and like getting out." And I really like feel only happy vibes when I look at it. And then when I look at it, or someone who knows more about waterway health looks at it, they're like, "Ooh, eutrophication, like that algae is out of control. That is an unhealthy waterway. That frog is like not living its best life," you know? So there's that push-pull of, like, the more you know, the more you can maybe see sometimes that a darker side, but that also I don't think just proselytation or just, shoving sad things in people's faces is the best way to communicate. I think you wanna engage, like, curiosity and empathy, and then maybe if they're interested, they sort of see some of the other parts too. I think that's what I've learned is the best way to communicate, so there's the light and the dark often, but sometimes you have
Yeah.
to find the dark.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, I think in today's world, when it comes to environmental communication and communication about climate change, there is this like serious problem. I think we're like a lot. I mean, for me, I know that, one more article about climate change, it's almost just overwhelming. Like, I
Mhm.
just, it's so upsetting. I just can't, right? So it's like there's always this fear of like shutting people down if you keep kind of pointing out the negatives. But it's still important to engage with it. I mean, do you have a story maybe of an audience or an interaction with your art where it has kind of changed the more they know about it? Or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just it depends on the person and on, like, what they are interested in. In Japan recently, because that's where I was this summer, and I had an exhibition there, and it was wild to me. This woman, saw that I was gonna have this exhibition, and so she went and looked me up online first because she wanted to, like, get a sense for what she was coming into.
Gotcha.
She found my website, and she read my website exhaustively, and she found out that the previous exhibition I had in Japan, not the one she was going to, just the previous one, was titled Ikigai, which is a Japanese concept that means sort of your sense of purpose for life. Like, why are you here on this earth? What is your meaning? What's your calling? Kind of. It's a Japanese term. And she was astounded that I knew a term in Japanese that she didn't, because she didn't know the sense, like what Ikigai was. So then she read a whole book about Ikigai
Oh my
and
gosh.
then came to my reception and then came to talk to me about it. And I was like, you are the most prepared viewer. I think I've never had someone previously tell me that they have, in preparation to see me at a reception, read a book.
That's amazing.
Ew, and then I was like, "I don't know that I have anything to tell you about Ikigai that you probably haven't already uncovered." I've not myself read an entire book about it. Like, I knew of it. I read some things about it, but at this point, please educate me more on this concept.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think maybe I don't know, it goes back to this idea of, like, art allows people to engage, like, they feel like they're I guess not something as scary as sometimes science or is, like, foreign feeling or, like, I have to be super smart to engage with science, right? Like, art has this feeling of, like, "Oh, I can read up on it," or I can yeah, read a
Well, I
book,
think
watch a movie,
tying things
documentary.
I think tying things really locally
Yeah.
is such an in. Like, when you mentioned the vet school, I did this sculpture of a vulture. And for every piece at the vet school, and honestly, for many of my pieces just out in the world, I really try to have local ties.
Yeah.
And so for the vet school, though, I was like, every single piece has to use some veterinary tool, chemical,
Mm.
something, at least one, maybe four or five, who knows, in the piece. And so I sculpted this vulture and I like finished it and I had it out. And then I was like, so what do you think is in it? Like, before you go read the label, before you figure it, like, what do you think the vet thing is? And a lot of them, like, and these were the vets at the vet school, right? So, like, they're very familiar with what their stuff is, and they were looking at it, and they're like, "Gosh, I just don't know. Like, what could it have been?" And what it actually was that I used AstroTurf, which they use, like, on a lot of the perches so that the birds have something a little bit softer and more like grass to grip onto.
Oh.
They also have it flat too, but it's just something that is, like, easily cleanable, that is less hard on their feet, and I used it for the neck feathers, and it actually sculpts amazingly well with the heat guns. Like, the heat gun sort of, like, melts and warps the plastic depending on how close you get it, so I was able to really, like, transition it from looking, like, very sort of mechanical looking, like, like AstroTurf, normally everything's exactly the same height, exactly the same length, like, all that, like, to it was, like, so very, and they were like, "Oh, I didn't know," but then they got so excited because there is this, like, direct tie to their work
Right.
physically embodied in this, like, portrait of this animal that they also work with, and that's, like, one of those things that, yeah, it just has so much emotion to those who hear about that, right? Like to someone who doesn't work at the vet school at all, who also doesn't work with like wild raptor populations or anything, they probably don't really care that much that there's astroturf in the neck. They might still appreciate it aesthetically, but like it might not connect in that way. But for the people who are already in that field, they're just so excited to see that nod to what they do.
Yeah.
I think just everywhere I go and whatever I do, my hope is that I can create something that authentically is especially resonant to that place and that population. And then ideally as a secondary goal, it is also very resonant to other folks outside of it, but they just might miss some of the like reasons that it particularly resonates with a specific subset of the
Right.
audience, if
Right.
that makes sense. And
Yeah.
again, even that, if they did enough research, if they look into the materials list, like they might then get it and see why. But I also try to make sure that the people who I'm actually sort of in the place making the work about and therefore kind of for as well really don't need explanation. They just can see it and be like, right, yes, like I connect very much with this.
Right. It seems like a very layered approach to you kind of have something for different audiences. Different audiences can look at the same piece of art and see very different things, which with science and science communication, that's also true. We just don't often think about the fact that, yeah, that different people look at the same thing in different ways.
I think it's also it again depends on your goals too, but like I said, like early in my artistic career, I did proselytize a lot more. And I found that that turned viewers off and that they weren't as engaged. And so I found at least for art, at least for the type of work that I make, that it just became much more successful and ultimately like conveyed my message more if I did leave some room for viewer narratives and for like the viewers to figure out how much they wanted to engage, and if they just want to engage in a surface level, it's still more engagement than none.
Yeah.
But then if they want to dig deeper, or if they just already have the connection to sort of be brought in deeper from the get go, then there they are.
Right. Do you have something that has been a challenge for you lately that you're working to overcome, and how are you overcoming it? Like, I mean, what's difficult for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are always things that you're working on. One of the things that you kind of mentioned that I think is good with my work, but I would like to diversify a little bit is that in part because I teach, at a teaching focused school for the bulk of the year every year, I have a pretty limited amount of studio time. So when I have studio time, I tend to prioritize because my work is about sort of global ecology. I travel for residencies and produce most of my work at artist residencies internationally. And that has really shaped sort of the scale of my work. And I think that's mostly been positive to neutral. But I would really like to not only have smaller works featuring 1 or 2, species or animals at a time, right? Like, I do think that it might be nice to create some really large, more museum scale pieces that have more species represented than just sort of the portraiture type stuff that I've been doing more, but it's very hard to find the time for that. So
Yeah.
I've kind of been waiting for either a sabbatical or a grant or possibly both, to be able to afford me the real studio time, to be able to accomplish such large scale pieces.
That makes sense. Like, I guess you're in doing individual residencies at, like, the LSU vet school, you were creating pieces particularly related to the LSU vet school, not necessarily, like, broadly mixing together different species or different science that you've seen.
Well, and it's not that I couldn't either there. I
Right.
mean, you would have been perfectly happy if I wanted to make, paintings depicting multiple things I saw there all at once, but
Right.
the amount of time I had there was finite, right? Like
Right.
I was there for a 2-month residency. So in my mind, usually both logistically, at the residency and then also like transportation wise,
Yeah.
it's usually preferable to make maybe like 10 smaller paintings rather than one enormous painting
Yeah,
because
that makes sense.
usually the 10 separate paintings can appeal to more viewers maybe than the one. Looks like you were more productive even if
Right.
it's taken the same amount of time. In terms of exhibiting, like, museum-sized pieces can get acquired by museums, which would be lovely, but in terms of exhibiting them, it's really expensive to try to ship those across the country to have them in because you have to have really large boxes, so smaller pieces are actually more affordable to exhibit as well. So for many reasons, I've sort of really, like, swung that way. Also, when I'm doing them internationally, like, just imagine transportation's even more expensive, right?
Right.
So, yeah, most of my work is intimate in scale, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that intimacy is great for a viewer. But it would be nice to have that be, like 70 or 80% of my oeuvre and then have some, like, really, really large pieces as well. So,
Right, right.
hopefully at some point.
Yeah. So what are you doing right now in terms of, like, forming, like are you yeah, what are you thinking about when you're forming, like, particular edges along the bowl?
I'm not
Or is it
thinking
just, like,
that's
to
the great thing about the collaboration with the I'm not thinking really, which is why when you were like, "I would like to see you doing something," I was like,
perfect.
"Oh, no, if I'm trying to paint and talk to you, I will stop talking to you if I get into a nitty-gritty area. I don't have to think for this because I'm collaborating with the clay. So wherever the clay wants to end, I'm just rounding it. If I notice that there's like a so if you've noticed I might have rounded something and then gone back and cut it out, that's me noticing, like, I finally look down and I'm like, "Oh, it's not, like, the same thickness at the top, so actually let me just get it to where it's the same thickness." But I'm really just letting the clay end where it wants to end, and then I'm just sort of smoothing it, and I'm using, this is just a needle tool. It is actually not really I don't know if it's intended for this purpose, but it's my favorite tool for this purpose, so
That's cool. Yeah, I figured, ceramics it feels kinda meditative, or it seems like it would be. I've never tried it, but
I think ceramics and printmaking, if you are carving in wood, I think both of those somehow like hit some sort of caveman-ish consciousness. They're very zen. I actually had this debate with my students a lot because I have several of my students who say that painting is very zen, and they're shocked that I say that I find it extremely stressful because they're like, "It's what you're probably the most well known for." I'm like, "Well, sure, but that doesn't make it stress-free." Like, I'm very stressed when I am painting because my paintings are so detailed and precise, and I'm trying to hit, like, very specific anatomy, but also I'm thinking about, like, color theory and my overall narrative for the piece, right? Like, there's a lot going into it, whereas, yeah, this I was like, "Oh, I can chat your ear off and look at you for a lot of it,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
like, it's
Wait,
not gonna
is
ruin
that
the
like
piece."
can you get into a flow state kind of thing with a painting, or is it always very, like, cognitive?
There are some moments when I can talk with people while I'm painting if I'm doing something that is more, sort of mechanical. If I'm, like,
Yeah.
varnishing it and it's just, like, it's a thing and I've got to put the thing on and, like, if it's like that, totally can talk with someone. Most of the time, though, when I am painting, like, it's either going well, but I need to, like, keep that flow of mark making and choice going so that it doesn't veer off, or it's actively going poorly and I'm, like, super stressed and cursing out loud and, like, very tense. And for kind of either of those situations, I don't really love having to interact with someone else at the same time. Um, I sometimes can, 'cause I do residencies, right? So sometimes you'll have,
Right.
like, a visitor show up and you'll have
Oh,
to kind
yeah.
of be like, "Oh, right, hi." But I usually try to make it if I know that that's happening, I won't be actively working on a painting at that time just
Yeah.
because it is kinda less easy for me to pause that than it is for me to pause with, like, either ceramics or graphic design. I'll do, like, sketches and other things digitally for my work. And even, yeah, pencil sketching, like, a new painting for me is less stressful than the actual active painting, so typically I try to do that sort of thing if I have to chat
Yeah.
with someone.
How do you stay hopeful right now in the midst of, like, not only climate changes, a lot of the things that you're painting or portraying might be animals that are yeah, and environments that are endangered or themselves endangered. Also, not to mention, like, defunding things like national parks and, the more negative side of our actions or inactions on the environment. Like, how do you stay hopeful in the midst of all that, especially when your art actively has that as its goal of yeah, subject?
I think I have kind of a two-part response to that. The first, the hopeful part is that I think humanity, contains multitudes, right? So we have some parts that are doing things that are really not great. But I think we also have the people who are, like, really innovators and who are solving problems, figuring out how to get microplastics back out of the environment, like, innovating, creating new things. So I think we never know like what we're capable of next. And I think that we potentially are very capable of sort of solving the problems that we have created for ourselves. So that part, that's my hopeful part. I don't know if you would call this other side hopeful, but I would, which is maybe we'll see what other people think. I also think that there's a good chance that humanity is just perhaps a virus that will burn itself out and the world will continue on without us. And I
Yeah.
don't know that I see that as hopeless either. So I think,
Yeah, it's certainly I
no,
mean, yeah. No, I think that
the
there's
natural
maybe
world is very resourceful and it has resilience and it continues on. And I think it can do that without humanity as well.
yeah. No, I think that could be reassuring, right? Of, like, looking at nature in the world, and sometimes there's this, yeah, idea of it's like I have grief, not for humanity necessarily, but, like, for everything else. So, like, realizing that, okay, the earth and all these animals and plants and they've survived a long time before us, and they'll survive a long time after us. At least that part is reassuring, even if, yeah, like humans, if, we give ourselves a pretty hard time in the meantime.
I mean, yeah, I think the real loss for me is not just if the humans give themselves a hard time in the meantime, but it is for those species that just through human specific actions we bring to extinction.
Yeah.
But even that, like there's always some factor that impacts like, population growth or decline. Which is not like we are for sure the ones that are doing the most right now in the world, but we're not the only factor, right? Like there are others so yeah, I think some form of nature will continue on forever. Whether or not humanity will, I think is actually more up in the air.
Yeah, that's true. What about, like, with your students? Since now you're well, we didn't really talk about your kinda history, but now you're in a position as a professor, in a teaching university, you can correct me, but, yeah, what is your approach now, and kinda what do you feel like students in art today and science art need to hear, or what do you hope to give them?
Yeah, I mean, so many individual messages really. I don't know that there's like we're all different people, so not everyone has to
Yeah.
hear the same thing. But yeah, so I guess to back up. So I am the art department chair and professor of art at the Morningside University in Sioux City. And we have a lot of great students here. I think a lot of them are rightfully nervous about AI. So
Yeah.
I guess that's something that is really gonna have to be an ongoing conversation, as we sort of figure out even legally what is going on with that, because there's a lot of legal battles right now, around, like, what it can sort of pull from. Currently, though, US law has determined, at least as of present, that anything that AI generates is not copyrightable because it
Right.
is derivative, and I think that's really good news for artists because it means that I think that there will still absolutely be industry needs for both graphic design, but also like handcraft art, in
Right.
particular. I mean, handcraft AI is not touching anyway,
Right.
but like things like photography and other stuff, AI exists, but can't be copywritten. So if I generate something and then try to exhibit it and sell it and all of that, and then you manage to create exactly the same prompt and get exactly the same image, you can also sell it and like do all the things with it, right? And that's not what any business or artist really probably wants. So I think that's good, but I do think it's something that we're going to have to continue really talking about in part because it also facilitates cheating more easily, I suppose. So we already had copyright. And for a long time, like back before the internet, it actually was very easy to sort of take someone else's artwork and present it as your own and not get found out.
Right.
So that is effectively being recreated now because now it is very hard if you have AI generate like a graphic design or a photo or something like that because it's derivative, but it's not identical, like, it's gonna put new stuff in. So, you can't reverse image search and be sure that that's what it was.
Right.
So, that part is harder. So I guess just really making sure this is not really a problem for my art students, though. I would
Right.
the people it's a problem for maybe non-art students in art classes, but
Right.
managing to convince them that it is not a useful practice to do that, I think is something that I would convey for sure.
Right.
Um, but yeah, in general, I think like we're like humanity in part is set apart from other animals by like the ability to create
Oh,
artworks.
yeah, I agree.
Like I don't know if you remember, I wrote that into my thesis in graduate
Oh.
school. Like there is actual research on how like the ability to create artwork actually like was part of a big rush to sort of change how humans as animals were, and it's part of what has made us so successful. So I think being able to continue being creative and putting our work out there and self-expressing and communicating, like that's so important.
That seems very prescient that you wrote that in your thesis. Where are you thinking about AI then, or no, just the fact that as
No,
humans we should create art?
I think I was really again like connecting sort of science and art, if you will,
Yeah.
but being like, listen, like I think even when I was, like, sort of growing up, there was this cultural, like, starving artists, art is not worthwhile, like, it's just
Right.
something that you do as a hobby, and I think I've always been very against that. I think that art, like I said, it's a synthesis of everything. You really can't be, in my opinion, a good artist without understanding a lot about other disciplines, and I think for some reason, like, people just have this weird froofy person who doesn't, like, understand a lot and is just, like, throwing shit on the wall and making it stick as, like, their narrative of what most artists are, and I'm like, it's not that there maybe aren't 1 or 2 of those in the mix, but I actually think most of us are actually really expert in a lot of different areas and able to synthesize it to then be able to produce art. And so I think in my thesis, I was trying to make the argument that like, right, like this is the thing that is the pinnacle of human like success and evolution is actually the ability to make art. Like that is counter to the sort of narrative that it's this sort of thing that we don't need to care about.
Yeah. I agree, and I think that that, like, kind of dichotomy, right, bit of science, art, you can't be both kinda thing has been, has a long history. I feel like it, at least in science communication kinda circles, and maybe it was to me, personally, I think, like, during COVID, we kinda saw, a lot of people just general in society kind of, like, looking at ourselves like, "Well, what are we doing?" Like, going through a hard time and art coming out of that, and there was a push for science to include art for the sake of kind of reaching all people kinda thing with messages about health safety and health literacy and that kinda thing. But do you find that it's changing in terms of people's, uh, I don't know, perceptions that science and art go together and are complementary and/or should be studied in the same spaces?
Some people, sure. I don't know that I think systemically, no. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
all trends, at least locally, I mostly know sort of statewide trends in K through 12 education, but statewide trends are
Right.
still for sure cutting art out of their curriculums. So, yeah, statewide, at least, art is still being severed from that and seen as this accessory thing that we should invest less in so that we have more time for other areas.
Mm,
Which I think is truly sad because again, like it actually builds usually understanding across different disciplines and deepens your knowledge and all the other areas that then you bring in. Um, so yeah, I wish it were different. I hope eventually it will become different. It's also wild to me because in the US, the one thing we are still at least we were, I haven't looked recently. It might have changed since the pandemic, but the one thing we used to be number 1 in the world for was creativity, like, in our educational system specifically,
gotcha.
so, like, other countries had o overtaken us in, like, reading and math and writing and right, like, all of these, like, skills other countries were producing, like, the best, of the best for, but the one thing that the US was actually over everyone else for was creativity, and that specifically was still seen as a driver because creativity is not just limited to art, right? Like, I mean, you
Right.
need to be creative to envision the next entrepreneur thing that you wanna pursue, like, all the different right? Like, it requires thinking outside the box. Um, and so that's still why we were getting many, many, many students from other countries coming to us for, their collegiate education because it's actually really, really important, and if it's not in your sort of native ecosystem to have that creativity, you kind of have to learn it somewhere or you're never going to innovate, and innovation is always the thing that can really like, transform everything, right? So for us to be whittling away at that specifically and still not improving on any of the other vectors is just crazy to me.
That is, yeah. Well, I mean, that must mean that you think that creativity is can be learned, right? Because I think there's people that are like, "Oh, creativity is just you either have it or you don't." But
No, yeah, I
y
have, like, in my teaching career, I teach a lot of different classes, as you can probably imagine, given that I work in a lot of different media, and, there have been a couple classes where, like, there's one student I've taught in the entirety of time that I've taught drawing, who after a full semester of working with her, I was like, drawing is genuinely not something that I think you
It's not your
excellent
skill.
at, right? Like, I think you could get better, but, like, I don't think that you have a baseline talent for drawing. But that in no way means that you don't have a room for creativity or for an artistic practice. There are, like, another 20 disciplines in art out there, right? Like, go try photography, try graphic design, try printmaking, try, like, paper cutout artwork, try pyrography, right? Like, there's so many things that you could try. But I do think a lot of people, because we don't always like explore all of the arts, especially in K through 12 nowadays, I think a lot of people distill being able to do art to specifically drawing and maybe a little bit painting, and that's it.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's so unfair to the whole, right? Like, I mean,
right, right,
this is art too,
right,
but it does require access to, like, a kiln and other things that you just might not have the facilities to do, but then someone might be like, "I'm awful at art because I don't like and or am not good at drawing exclusively," and the 2 are not synonymous.
right, right. And yeah, maybe as scientists, we often look at like the skills, like if you're really skilled in a particular thing, that makes you an artist, but really it's like this ability to get creative and look at things in a particular way that is so important. I feel like when that is transferred to science, just like you said with like synthesis making, I mean, that's ultimately scientific insight isn't just doing the experiment. It's like synthesizing the knowledge and having that inform a potentially new way of thinking or a new solution. And you don't get
Absolutely.
that without, yeah,
But
without
also,
creative
to
thinking.
be clear, it was a student across my entire teaching career who I didn't think was equipped to draw
Right.
as well. So I'm, like, focusing really hard on this one student being like, there were other options. I think everyone else, it's like, put more time into it.
Yeah.
Like, anything, if you expect to start, like, figure skating and throwing, like, triple
Right.
lutzes instantly, I don't think you're gonna do it.
Right.
I think that takes a certain level of time. Like, with the silks,
Oh,
right? Do you
yeah,
think
absolutely.
today I can adopt the silks and, like, do what you're doing, like, after years and years of practice? I don't think so. Like, you have
Right.
to, like, put that time in.
Right. Yeah, there's a mastery to all these things. Yeah, so for those who aren't aware, I do aerial silk circus arts, but it's really interesting. There's people that are really I mean, can look at that and just get curious about like how does this thing move? Like what can I do with it that has nothing to do with skill necessarily. But you combine that with skill and mastery of the fabric of the material of the form. Um, and then you start to get really beautiful things because you're kinda combining that getting curious and creation with skill, you know?
Well, and
Um,
that's kind of one of the things, like, you're like, people bring
yeah,
in sort of external knowledge and then combine that with skill and they can do amazing things. I
right,
feel like that across all, like, the more artistic disciplines the more you can see through lines, right? Like,
right,
I would not have been painting with ferric chloride if I didn't know how to do printmaking and if I also wasn't using ferric chloride in ceramic applications to the point where I feel pretty comfortable using that, like, material.
right,
Right? So, like, without that, like, that wasn't gonna come into my painting practice even if it ended up getting applied to painting.
right. Or using scientific materials to create art if you weren't working in the scientists in the lab.
Also true.
So cool. I feel like we should probably wrap up soon since it's
Yeah.
been about an hour. But yeah, is there anything like last thing that you would, I don't know, that you feel like the world should hear, or that you feel like audiences should know?
I feel like a trend amongst the kids these days is to say touch grass.
Yeah.
I believe that everyone should try to do that at minimum every day. Like, if you are not somehow getting outside to where, like, it's not even a thing that you have to think about, like, make that a part of your practice to where you eventually get to the point where you're like, "Of course I touch grass, I don't have to think about it."
Right. I love that. I'm getting back to gardening myself. My day job has taken me away from it to some extent, but I'm ready to get into it again. At least started a little vegetable garden, even if just like a raised garden. I've been like going and picking the tomatoes all there for snacks, so that
No,
feels
it's
good.
just it's so wholesome, like, it's like, we're so digital sometimes, and, like, all the troubles of the world, yeah, the worries about all the things, getting caught up in the news cycles, like, just get offline, go outside, go for a lovely walk in nature, garden, go biking, go swimming, like, be out there, and then I think not only will that be really healing, but you're gonna start to build new connections to your community that way and, like, care more and volunteer and do citizen science and just, like, the life will be better, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I agree.